Yep, I think we're live. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody around the world who's watching this. I'm Alberto, and I work at Developer Relations on Moonbeam. And welcome to Mission Control, an event where we'll cover some pre-Moonbeam take flight checklists. So for today, we've compiled a bunch of questions that community members have asked via either Telegram or Discord, and we will make sure that those get answered today. And for that, today I'm joined by Derek Yu, the CEO of PureStake and Moonbeam founder. And I'm also joined as well by Aaron Evans, as director of the Moonbeam Foundation, the entity organizing the Take Flight event. So yeah, take it away, you guys.
I'd like to kick things off. Thanks everyone for kind of joining us here and for your kind of interest in the Take Flight event. I just wanted to maybe kick things off and explain, set the stage a little bit, and then I'll hand it off to Aaron, since the Moonbeam Foundation, really this is their event. Just the first kind of point of explanation is, there are these two different, organizations. We've been working very closely with the Moonbeam Foundation, which is a Singapore-based foundation, which is really kind of they're the stewards of the network, whereas we're more the tech guys kind of building the software. I guess I just wanted to share a few thoughts just before I hand it off to Aaron on kind of what's the idea, or like what is the strategy, or what is kind of the point of Take Flight, and from my perspective. And the idea is that we really wanted to focus on the Moonbeam community, and as part of the launch of the Moonbeam network, we really wanted to make sure that kind of core contributors and community members who had been supporting the project for in some cases for some time, for many months, and been really putting a lot of their personal time and energy into the project, had an opportunity to obtain tokens that could then be used to engage, with the network. So they could be, real network participants, participate in on-chain governance, interact with, different kinds of applications that are deployed to the network. And so I kind of make that point up front because that's different than some other, other ideas, right? So, the idea was not to, kind of have as broad a participation as possible. I've seen some other projects do, that was not the idea here, right? We really wanted to focus on kind of just the core community members, and we went to some great lengths to try to identify those community members. I think also we weren't trying to kind of maximize for anything else other than kind of identifying these core community members and kind of making sure that they had an opportunity to participate. I kind of want to set the stage with those comments, kind of explain this little bit of PureStake, we're the folks building the software. Aaron from the foundation are the folks kind of running the event. And so since it's the foundation's event, I'll hand it off to come back to Alberto and Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. So I guess one of the first questions that people comes to the mind of people when they see the information around the event is that there are three different rounds, right? So Aaron, can you shed some light on what is the difference between the three rounds, and how will the event be set up?
Sure. So there are three rounds. The first round includes very early supporters, Moon River crowd loan participants, Moonbeam ambassadors, the Pokepet holders that submitted their emails to us. So this group has guaranteed allocation, and it starts on September 7th at 3 p.m. UTC and goes until, as you can see, the 9th at 11 a.m. UTC. So the subsequent two rounds are first come, first serve. And the second round was a larger set of community members. So looking at our Discord and groups like that, and people who have been in those registered for quite some time. And then the third group is really just builds on top of that and extends it further without some of those cutoffs and so on. So as you can see, the second round gets started on the 11th at 3 p.m. UTC and runs until the 10th at 3 a.m. UTC. And then lastly, the third round, the 10th at 3 p.m. UTC until the 11th at 3 a.m. Yeah, and so one thing that's kind of important to note is that if you are in round one, well, in each round per person, the minimum contribution is 500 USD, and the maximum is 2,500 USD. But if you're in round one, you can also participate in round two and round three, and similarly, if you're in round two, you can participate in round three as well. So really important to note. Well, firstly, I think this is well documented on the foundation site. 80 million of the Glimmer supply was allocated for the event. They're going to be sold at a fixed price of 25 cents USD per Glimmer. There is a lockup of 40 days following Moonbeam launch. So what does that mean, right? So that means you'll be purchasing or you'll be acquiring the tokens during the event. And then, there's a number of phases that have to happen, and we're going to go through that a little later. But once we do launch and transfers are enabled, EVMs enabled, and so forth, there'll then be a 40-day lockup period until you're able to trade those tokens. For payment, we're accepting ETH, USDT, and USDC. For the stable coins, please note that these are Ethereum ERC20 only. So it's got to be the Ethereum network.
Great. Thanks, Aaron, for that detailed description about the rounds and how the details around the event. That's really important. So a lot of people have asked, what do I need to do, or let's say like a checklist of things that I need to make sure that I don't miss, right? Because a lot of people are very anxious. They're like saying and asking, hey, I'm all like, this is what I have set up. Am I ready to participate, right? So it makes sense for you if you can do sort of what people need to have done before the Take Flight event launches on September 7th.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So first of all, you need to have gone to takeflight.moonbeam.foundation and register there and pass identity verification, so KYC. Once that's complete, then you need to set up a payment and receiving address. So these, again, these are Ethereum styled addresses. So of course, Moon River and Moonbeam follow the Ethereum style of addresses. And to pay, you're going to need to use MetaMask. And again, as I said before, the payments have to be done using ETH, USDT, or USDC stablecoins, the ERC20 variety, on the Ethereum network. Make sure you have enough ETH to cover the gas fees in addition to your payment amount. And then one other, important thing to note, and kind of apologize for this, MetaMask, you need to use MetaMask on a PC or laptop. The mobile is not supported. It's unfortunate. Just the flow, the application that we're using, unfortunately, doesn't work with mobile. So that's please be ready with some sort of laptop or PC or desktop.
Yeah, I guess the idea is so people are aware, what do they need to have ready for the day of the event. So just to make some remarks, it is very important. We have had a lot of people from the community ask about other, USDTs or USDCs from other networks. So please make sure if you're going to pay in those stable coins, it need to be from the Ethereum network. That's very important. And you need to have enough ETH to cover gas fees. And it is truly difficult to say, what will be the gas fees at the moment of the event. So I suggest you go to, for example, gasnow.org, I think it is the website, and track down what is the gas price currently at Ethereum at the moment of the event. It is important to have also the payment and addresses registered and connected before the event. So make sure those things you have done before the event and you have everything set up. So I noticed that originally there was a higher allocation for the token event, right? And this was shift down to 8%, and to make room for liquidity incentives. Can you shed some light around why that decision was taken?
Yeah, no, that's right. So originally 16% was allocated, and we took of that 16%, we took 8% of it in order to run liquidity programs on Moonbeam. So as we engage further with different teams in the ecosystem, it became increasingly clear that we would need to earmark some tokens to form for liquidity incentives in order to really fuel the growth of the Moonbeam network. So while we still ensure that Glimmer is distributed to the builders, users, the community, so that was the reason really to drive those liquidity incentive programs.
Makes sense. Makes sense. All right, and okay, so a lot of people have asked as well around the queuing system, right? So we know that round one has a guaranteed allocation. Round two and round three will work on a first come first base system, right? So can you explain a little bit about how the queuing system will work for the Take Flight event?
Sure. So so as you mentioned, there's a queuing system. It manages the flow of people through the event. As you can imagine, there's going to be quite a bit of demand and requests coming at the platform. So firstly, only whitelisted users who log into their TokenSoft account will be able to enter the queue. There's no advantage to having multiple tabs open. You're not going to get multiple places in line, so no point in doing that. If you enter the queue before the event opens, you'll be put into a waiting room. And then when the event opens, you're going to be randomly chosen to enter the site until the waiting room is empty. So anyone who enters the queue at or before the start time is going to be let in on a first come, first served basis. So there is an advantage to entering before the event starts, but there's really no advantage to entering, say, 2 hours before or 2 minutes before, because it's only once the event starts that those in the waiting room will be randomly chosen. So we recommend that round 2 and round 3 participants join the queue maybe perhaps 5 minutes before the event starts. Once you enter and you make it through the queue, you will then have about 30 minutes to complete your transaction. So hopefully that clarifies things.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, that actually clarifies a lot of the questions that people have asked in the community. One important thing, right, and another question, and we can stay in this slide for this, is that paying in stable coins, it kind of makes sense because it's a stable coin, right? So that if you contribute, let's say 2,000 USDTs, you will be contributing, around $2,000 plus or minus a couple cents, right? But what about ETH, right? I mean, the ETH USD rate it's very volatile. It can be very volatile, right? So how is the ETH to USD rate will be determined during the event?
Yeah, that's right. So with ETH, what will happen is that the TokenSoft platform, when you go to pay, it will take a look at the ETH and convert to USD based on an exchange rate that is updated hourly. And then it will then calculate the amount of tokens that purchases based on that USD value. So again, the TokenSoft platform receives an hourly average price. It's updated every hour. So at the top of the hour, so whatever it was, if you buy it, say like 1:15 p.m., the price that was updated at 1 p.m. is going to be the one that is applied. And those prices are sourced from nomics.com. And then so when payment is received, that's the price that's going to be used to determine the number of tokens.
All right, and it makes sense because, as we know, there can be some fluctuations, right? So basically, the idea is that when people are going to pay, let's say I want to contribute X amount of dollars, the website will tell me, okay, this corresponds to this amount of ETH, and that will be like what you will be sending through MetaMask for the event as a payment. So that is important to also point out. So also this is very important to remark. So I'm also gonna ask you to stay in this slide and make sure that we are people are aware about this. So what are the things do you think that people need to be aware, for example, regarding the reimbursements, the event duration, the distribution of the tokens, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think some really key things, like first of all, the way the flow works, the platform works, there will not be reimbursements. And if you contribute, I mean, because the thing is, at the end of the day, what you put into MetaMask, you could say you're going to do one thing and then put in a different value. So if you contribute less than the minimum amount, then there's no reimbursement for that. and really you're not going to end up with any tokens. And same with contributing over the maximum amount. Again, there's no reimbursement there. The other thing I would say is that the finalized SAFT, so simple agreement for future tokens, it could take a little while for you to get that finalized SAFT. It could be several days. It could be even a week or two. Hopefully not that long. But they will be complete. They will be generated and completed following round 3 closing. And then lastly, I would say, and I alluded to this before, the 40-day lockup begins at network launch. So again, that is when, that's not, that we're going to go through the various phases in a bit, but I think, because I think there were some questions around that, but it will only be after transfers are enabled and the EVM is enabled that the 40-day begins.
Yeah, makes sense. So one thing that I want to know that is on the slide is that the event is hosted by a third-party provider. So the Moonbeam Foundation will not be able to offer live support during the event, but we'll do our best to, so please complete the pre-flight steps that we're covering in this presentation, because that is probably the best way that you will be ready to participate in the Take Flight event. So that is an important remark that we have to address.
Yeah,
so
that's a great point.
Yep. So Aaron, so you mentioned the distribution, right? And a lot of people, we saw that with Mover. A lot of people are eager to know when they will receive their tokens and so on. So I guess this now goes to you, Derek. Let's say I participated in the Take Flight event, when will Glimmer show up in my wallet?
That is a good question, and that's actually a question that we can't precisely answer with a date. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that there are certain things that need to happen that are literally outside of our control, that are required in order for the network to launch. And so I think the best way to think of it is, and by the way, for those, I know many, given that we were focusing on the core community, many of you have been with the project as we've, gone through a lot of these launch steps, for Moon River, for the Kusama deployment. And just to kind of step back for a minute, of course, the whole idea behind, or one of the great benefits of the, Moon River, the Kusama deployment, is that it really has served as as a run through this whole process that's really going to be, repeated again, on Polkadot, right? So, in fact, as a team, we've gained a huge amount of, experience and knowledge, from doing it, on Kusama to start. And so, I'll go through, some of the different steps that have to happen here, but they should look familiar to you, for all of you that have been kind of following, the progression of the Moon River network. So, the first thing that has to happen is that, parachain auctions need to commence on Polkadot, right? So that's something that is not the case right now. It is not possible to deploy a parachain onto Polkadot right now, right? That there's just no way to do that. And just as with Kusama, there will be a kind of a commencement date for when parachains, begin. The parachain auctions begin on Polkadot. I would also say that we don't have any special insider knowledge here about when this is going to happen. I think we can only make informed assumptions here, right? So our informed assumption is that the process will look quite similar to what was done on Kusama, right? Because I think from Parity's perspective, it's the same thing, where they kind of went through this whole process once on Kusama, that they're going to look to replicate again on Polkadot. So we anticipate a similar kind of a thing where there's a batch, maybe it'll be 5 on Kusama, a batch of parachain slots that will be put up first. And then, just, as was done for our Moon River deployment, there will be a crowd loan, for Moonbeam, that will be a campaign designed to, obtain the DOT that is necessary to have a winning bid at auction to occupy one of these initial slots. And the same auction mechanism that was used on Kusama will be, we have no reason to believe it won't be the same kind of mechanism on Polkadot. Candle auction, for those of you that participated, right, there's kind of kind of an opening kind of period, like where your contributions are kind of guaranteed to be counted, like against the auction bid. Then there's kind of this like variable time when the auction can end, and but yeah, all that leads up to basically a successful crowd loan campaign, which would result in kind of occupying for Moonbeam, like occupying one of the available parachain slots, like on Polkadot. But the story doesn't end there, right? So like just as with Moon River, we will use like a very similar kind of launch sequence to what was used on Moon River. We're going to use a similar thing on Moonbeam, where basically there'll be kind of a phased or sequenced rollout where at the beginning we're kind of just attached as a parachain producing blocks, but none of the kind of features or functionality are enabled. And then, there would be kind of a phased approach where we kind of activate, first we bring in kind of the decentralized collators to kind of decentralize like block production on the network. Then we activate governance features, and then, it ends with basically this launch sequence ends with like the full activation of transfers and EVM capabilities. That's what happened last Thursday, basically a week ago, yesterday on the Moon River network. And so that, it's the end of that launch process. That's like what's considered full launch, right? So like, I just kind of want to be clear that, there is this previous event, which is there's a successful crowd loan, Moonbeam kind of comes to life as a parachain. That's not full launch. That is a launch in a sense, but that's not full launch, right? That's kind of one step along the way towards like achieving this kind of full launch. And so, the same process we went through, we'll kind of get to, full launch. That's then what starts the 40-day, lock counter, where 40 days later, anyone who participates in Take Flight, their Glimmer tokens will be, unlocked at that point. And then, I think we'll, the story of Moon River is still unfolding, but like, there's already, substantive activity going on in terms of partners deploying. And, just as, Moon River was kind of like, we went through, a lot of, a lot of the steps on Moon River first. I think it's the same is true of like a lot of the ecosystem, partners and other protocols that are deploying. They have plans to deploy to both networks. So then we'll, proceed with starting, to kind of deploy all these protocols. All those will start to deploy, like the ecosystem will start to build, on Moonbeam.
Yeah, great points there, Derek. One thing that I also want to, it's a funny story that people always ask us, like, hey, like you mentioned, Derek, like, do you have some insider news about when, when parachains will come to Polkadot? And, as it happened with Kusama, is that, I wouldn't say it was unexpected, but, it was a little bit faster than we expected, right? So, it could be at any point, it could be, in a month, 2 months. So the main difference between Polkadot and Kusama is that Polkadot has a 28 unbundling period for staking, and that will be considered, right? So when the auctions are announced, there'll be at least 28 days to make sure that people can unbund their tokens. So at least there is a little bit more room for people to get prepared for the Moonbeam crowd loan when it starts. But yes, all of them are great.
I would second that. Like, I think people assume that like I have some sort of special like knowledge. I have like the special connections back to Parity. I do not know anything more than like any of you guys about like what the timing is of these things. I can only speculate. I think just to speculate for a moment, my speculation would be that I don't think that this announcement will come like what, because right now we're in like the second batch of Kusama auctions, right, are happening kind of right now. They're not going to like happen in parallel, right? So I'm sure that this batch of Kusama auctions will be seen through to completion before there will be commencement on Polkadot. That would be my, again, not official news or anything, but that's my best guess, basically, like right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that answer. So now moving towards the Moonbeam ecosystem, right? So Moonbeam has a lot of integrations and partnerships, and we're always saying that we're truly proud about the ecosystem we've built because, on Ethereum, there's a thing called composability, meaning that projects need to sometimes work together, right, in order to provide a function to the user. So what is the overall purpose of these partnerships, and why did they choose Moonbeam to launch your projects?
Oh, well, geez, that's a good question. Well, I without kind of going like stepping back too many steps, I would say that our goal has always been to provide kind of the easiest and least friction filled place where you can build protocols and applications in the Kusama and Polkadot ecosystems. And so that's what informed kind of a lot of choices along the way of focusing on Ethereum compatibility, focusing on having great developer documentation, focusing on a lot of the integrations that we have in place, so that if you're kind of an Ethereum developer, well, our goal is, we've listened very, very carefully to the folks who engage with us, and our goal is that someone coming from Ethereum, they can come over to Moonbeam and they'll feel right at home. It won't be this jarring experience where oh, well, this works differently, or hey, the tools are different, or I'm not used to this. It's it should be a fully familiar experience. And that's, I think we've managed to make quite a bit of progress in this, because we've gotten some pretty positive feedback on those goals. But that that's the goal. And I think the strategy really is around, it's just around this friction reduction. I mean, I do think that the belief is that whenever you have basically people are, developers are lazy, I think. I mean, it sounds weird to say, but if you kind of give them a choice that requires less hard thinking, less going through extra steps, you're just going to get more people kind of showing up at your door. And I think that's what's happened. I think that we see kind of this a huge amount of power in Polkadot as a system. I think that in particular the built-in networking function, right? So the ability to speak to different chains is something that I think is going to be extremely important in the future, right? I mean, you can see already now that there's this huge amount of different projects trying to build different kinds of cross-chain functions, bridges, other things. And there's a lot of innovation happening in that space. But I do think that Polkadot has this very unique advantage in that this kind of networking capability is built into the protocol itself. And so I think that's kind of our idea is well, let's take the best of that Ethereum has to offer, all of these great developer tools, all of these infrastructure services, all of these things that have been worked on in some cases for 5-6 years at this, or however many years. And then marry that into this Polkadot environment where you have things like forkless upgrades, this built-in networking layer to talk to other chains. I think that's kind of the idea around Moonbeam. I think that and a lot of projects I think have recognized this, right? And I think we've gotten feedback that when projects went to go look about how to deploy to Polkadot, that they look at kind of our user documentation, the support we provide, and other things. They're okay, well, this is the easiest path for me. And so I think we're quite kind of proud of the ecosystem of projects that's kind of is choosing to work with Moonbeam and even Moonriver at this point. And there is this kind of network effect, as you say, Alberto, where all these projects kind of depend on each other, but they all kind of it's kind of the whole is greater than some of its parts, right? As you continue to have, for example, different DeFi protocols, different things that all work together, in this kind of EVM compatible way, you kind of create this network effect where the entire network becomes a more interesting and more valuable place.
Definitely. I always I work at developer relations, right? So I have a lot of relations with developers from other teams, and I always tell them for us it's really important their feedback. And if there's any moment that you feel some friction around building on Moonbeam, let us know, because we want to be an Ethereum frictionless environment, right? So that's for us is very important. So how can new teams join Moonbeam? Give a couple of sentences about how you can join the Moonbeam ecosystem, and what types of partnerships the Moonbeam supports, basically.
I guess we're always looking for kind of new teams that want to deploy. So I think Alberto, a lot of the documentation and other things you've worked on the doc side is a great place to start, and we're always around to engage with folks that want to that want to talk about what a deployment would look like. I think we kind of pride ourselves also in the support that we're able to provide to serious teams that are real builders that want to deploy different kinds of protocols.
I guess one of the reasons that why people have deployed on Moonbeam is also because of the team that we've built, right? So we have a team with extensive experience, and you can provide some words around that there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and in the end, like, I mean, tech is important. It needs to work and all of this, but I think as with many things, it comes down in the end to the people that are behind it. And yeah, I think it's it's kind of my privilege to work with like a really great like team here. So I think that that's also something that I think we get feedback on, that that we that people really kind of like care here and like are trying to like support the projects that are deploying to us. I mean, we see kind of the these like developer teams. I mean, we're quite focused on the protocol development teams as like our customer, if you want to call it that. It sounds weird to use the word customer, but like that's kind of how I think about it, right? So like all of our like product efforts, all of our support efforts, all of these efforts are like focused around making sure that they have the best experience and they're getting like great support. And I think that's part of that is the team itself, right? And yeah, we've gotten like quite good feedback on that. I think that's, frankly, I think that's probably the most important reason why we've gotten been able to kind of create this like fairly pretty substantive like ecosystem, even though we're like Moonbeam isn't even launched, Moonriver just launched, but we already have a sizable ecosystem. And it's like even just since last week, right, on Moonriver, you can see that there's like a large amount of like deployment activity already happening with announcements to come on as those protocols kind of become live.
Definitely. All right. Yeah. So I guess what we're going to do now is that we're going to do some other questions we have grabbed from the community. So I'm just going to basically ask the question and open the stage to either Aaron or Kevin to Derek to answer these questions. So I guess we can just start with there have been a lot of interest from the community members around the strategy behind Take Flight. What is the mission and why it was designed the way it was. So I don't know. I guess this is more like an Aaron question. Oh, you're muted, Aaron.
I'm sorry, I was answering some questions in the chat. Sorry, what? Can you repeat?
Yeah, no worries. So there has been a lot of interest in the community, around, for example, there's a crowd loan, right? So the crowd loan, people know that they can participate also in the crowd loan, but the strategy behind the Take Flight event. So what is the mission of the Take Flight? I know we covered it at the beginning, but if you want to highlight
sure, no problem. Yeah, so Derek kind of touched on this in the beginning. This really is about giving back to the community and allowing the community to participate in the network. We didn't really try to maximize the amount of funds that this was generating. Really wanted to make this event available to our community. I mean, I think that kind of is in a similar spirit as really how Moonriver occurred, and the crowd loan rewards, and also just the token allocation on the Moonriver. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the core ethos here is that it's a very community oriented network and ecosystem. Definitely. Yeah, I don't know, Derek, if there was anything you wanted to add to that.
No, I think that's right on. And I mean, there will a crowd loan as well, so that that will be an additional option, and we hope to also have a great amount of participation in that. But I think that there was like quite a bit of interest we got from our core community members about having a way to to be able to participate in the network, and having a way to secure that like early, and particularly with this kind of this guaranteed allocation for some of our kind of strongest supporters. So I think that that was important. We kind of listened to feedback that we're getting, and try to like react and kind of do right by the folks that have helped us get to where we are now.
Yeah, definitely. It's truly a community focused event. So you kind of touch bases on that, Derek, a little bit, but a lot of people are very like, I didn't make it into the whitelist of the Take Flight event. What other opportunities will there be? I don't know, Aaron or you, Derek, want to touch base on that?
I mean, I know it's Aaron's event, but I can just jump in and kind of give you my thoughts on this, which is that, I mean, yes, there's been like a huge amount of like interest like in participation. I mean, way more than we could that could possibly be like serviced. And so this was again part of the like the thinking that went into the event, is that that's why there was like this pretty careful thought about like trying to identify folks that were kind of like longer term like supporters. And even then we could not like accommodate like everyone, but we I think there was efforts made to try to be kind of as fair as possible. And that's kind of why, for example, there was a strategy around taking snapshots before the event was even like announced, right? Like that, because once you announce something like this, then there's like a whole bunch of interest that gets generated. But for us, it was kind of like the folks that were interested before the event was announced. Like that kind of is an important signal. That was an important signal for us as a team as well as the foundation and Aaron.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the, for us at least, one of the core community members has been ambassadors without a doubt, right? I mean, we see them, providing a lot of support on social channels, a lot of support on Telegram and Discord. I mean, without them, it would be impossible to cover all the great questions that people in the community ask around, these channels. So what role, do ambassadors play in general supporting the ecosystems, and how can new ambassadors join?
Yeah, we have we launched the ambassador program was, I think, launched in January, and it's had like incredible growth like throughout like the year. I think I rewind back to January and we're like, oh well, should we kind of do this or not? And we were kind of weighing it back and forth. But now there's I don't even know how big it is now. Do you know actually? Like it's over 1,000 people, I think, right? So
it's well over 1,000, I would say.
A couple thousand people.
Oh, there you go. 1,200 ambassadors we have.
1,200. So it's like quite substantive. But I think beyond just the numbers, I think it's kind of the level of engagement like that I see, and like the enthusiasm and kind of the like the content, and there's like in our Discord there's like the people like baking like cakes and stuff, like Moonbeam cakes, and it's just like crazy basically. Like it's stuff I would have never like thought of like happening. And so I've been pretty much blown away by that. And I think we are continuing to see kind of this grow. I think that that's I think a large part of the strategy here. I kind of mentioned this earlier in the week on a different event, is that I think like us as a project, like we didn't, I think other L1s, right? I mean, we're kind of like an L1, right? So Polkadot's is layer 0, like we're like a layer 1. So, in some sense, it's kind of, and I don't like to talk about competing with other chains. I always think that cooperation can lead to like a bigger result than competition. But you look at some of the other like layer 1 projects, these are folks that have raised like massive amounts of money, basically, right? These are like very large like projects. So I think in that context, like we're definitely, have like a different feel, right? Where like we've not like raised huge amounts of money, and but I think that the strength that we have is kind of like this kind of grassroots interest and kind of this like community, right? Like now you already see it happening like on Moon River. That's I think that's kind of like one of the key strengths of the project. So I think that's, and ties into like the strategy for this take flight, and the whole way we're going about things is to kind of have this grassroots kind of community support that we can use to like to help drive like awareness for the project, and help make sure that that developers like know that this that we're an option, basically.
Yeah, and I just add that really, being evangelists, a lot of the promotion of and around the globe, especially with the international communities, other languages and so forth. And if you want to become an ambassador, there's a link in the chat that just went by. Hopefully it doesn't get off screen too quickly there, but certainly members of the community, if they want to become an ambassador, please go to the link and check it out.
Yeah, I mean, just I'm a native like Spanish speaking person, and I there is an unofficial Spanish community, and when I see the amount of interaction our Spanish speaking ambassadors, like they answer so many questions around the Spanish speaking persons and that group. It's just crazy to see it. I mean, I'm always like giving them a shout out, because it's just like they put all this amount of work. And they're just ambassadors, right? They're not even like persons working at a protocol level and involved with PureSig and so on. So it's just like it's truly exciting to see that, for sure. So there's a question that has been going around, and we wrote it down. We've seen it in the chat multiple times around Moonbeam Ethereum addresses and the payment and receiving addresses on the platform. So basically, I think the first question will go to Derek, and then the second one will go to you, Aaron. So
sure.
Moonbeam Ethereum addresses, why do we use Ethereum addresses, right?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So I think we are like to my knowledge, unique, like in the existing Kusama and Polkadot ecosystems, where the addresses, like, you know, the base addresses, like on our chain, are Ethereum style addresses, right? They start with 0x, and, you know, it's the same keys that you would use, like, you know, on ETH mainnet. So why did we do that, right? Because by default, like on chains, you know, they're built to substrate. You have these like substrate style addresses, right? They start with like letters, right? They don't start with 0x, right? They're kind of longer and they have like letters and numbers in them. I guess depending on the network, the leading number or character can be different. And the reason is that, you know, and you know, I mean, obviously that was the default we had when we started, but what we realized pretty quickly is if we really wanted to create an environment that was like truly Ethereum compatible, this was going to be like a big source of like friction and problems to have like a different address type, right? Because then, and I've seen other chains have tried to do this too, where they said, okay, well, let's do some Ethereum compatibility. We have the system, and then let's like add an EVM, kind of like bolt it like onto the side. But it ends up being like, yes, you can deploy your Solidity like smart contracts there, say, but then you have these like multiple addresses. You'll have like one address in the EVM, but then you have another address in the base chain, and then maybe you enable internal transfers in. So there's two addresses and you can maybe like move like tokens in between the two, but it's like, it's a poor user experience. And I think for developers that are looking to just like have an environment where their existing code is going to work, that is only really possible if you change these underlying addresses to be, you know, the same as what Ethereum has. So it was really part of like our whole product strategy to be like as low friction as possible, to be as Ethereum compatible as possible. That's what led us then to like change like these underlying addresses to be Ethereum like. And, you know, the cool thing is that, you know, there's kind of the power of Substrate being the development framework used to develop, you know, both Moonriver and Moonbeam, is that like that change, while kind of technically, like, you know, you have to know what you're doing to do it. You know, it was something where we could kind of change it in one place, and then it like changed everywhere, right? So like that's kind of the power of, you know, of Substrate, like where it's like a, you know, it kind of is this framework where you can make changes like that and like have like, you know, good guarantees that it's going to, you know, work and like be, you know, be correct everywhere.
Definitely. And one thing that I must say is that for the end users, so these guys that are participating in the Take Flight event and so on, this means that you will be able to use Ethereum wallets that can connect to custom networks, such as MetaMask, such as Nifty Wallet, Math Wallet, Ledger, and Trezor. You can use them on Moonbeam. So that's one of the benefits of having this, you know, what we call unified account systems. That all these wallets, I mean, there might be more, but, you know, we do have like native support with even tutorials on how to use these wallets on Moonbeam and Moonriver, right? So the question to you, Aaron, now is that, you know, payment address, receiving address, what is the difference? What do I have? I have to be careful with you know, when sending the payment address. Can you provide some information around that?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, first of all, you know, there is a tutorial with the link, and I think there's a little bit of confusion about setting them both up because there's a field to fill in the receive address, and there's a spot at the bottom to connect MetaMask in order to set up payment. They can be the same address. You know, if you have an Ethereum address and, you know, you're using MetaMask, and so you have the keys and so forth, you can use that same address for the receive address. And that goes back to what Derek was saying. I mean, it's kind of cool. I mean, Moonbeam hasn't launched, but you can generate an address now for where we're going to ultimately send your tokens. Now, one thing that's really important, and I believe this is with the payment address, that it must be unique per sort of email participant. So it's got to be unique to the email address of the person that is connecting. So because that's kind of how we're tying the payment and participation. So that's pretty important.
Yeah. So I guess what this means, Aaron, is that let's say you like the platform that the Moonbeam Foundation is using for the event is called TokenSoft. So if you participated in another TokenSoft hosted event, right, you have to use the same payment address. The receiving address doesn't have to be the same, but the payment address must be the same, right?
Right. Yeah. Sorry. No, if that wasn't clear. Yeah. So if you have participated in another event with TokenSoft, then yeah, you're going to need to use the same payment address.
Exactly. But then the receiving address, because, for example, Moonbeam is Ethereum compatible, you can just use, you know, a MetaMask address or whatever. I think the important thing to clarify here is that, you know, you need to own the private keys or the mnemonics and make sure you keep them safe because they give direct access to your funds. You need to make sure you own the mnemonic of the private key of this account that you're providing. So this means that you cannot use exchange addresses. Please be careful with that, because if you provide a receiving address that it's from an exchange, that means probably that you will lose the funds that you should get with the take flight event. So it is really important to clarify.
Yeah, do not use an exchange address for the receive, because if that exchange doesn't implement a direct mapping of ETH addresses to Moonbeam, then there will be nothing that we can do, because you're not in possession. So it's very important that for the receive address you are in possession of the keys.
Exactly. All right. Another question that people have gotten, even with the launch of Moonriver, right? And I think this is more like a Derek question might be. So let's say I'm a Glimmer holder in the future when the network launches. What can I do with my Glimmers in the future, right? So how can I interact with the network?
Yeah. Well, so I think that one great way to look at that will be kind of to look at like what happened and will happen on Moonriver, because you already start to see kind of the utility of the Glimmer token is kind of exactly the same as the utility of the Mover token, like on Moonriver. And so what are some of the things that we've even seen in the last week since we've been live, like on on Moonriver? So I would say that staking is probably the number one thing that we've seen like quite a bit of uptake on. At this point, I think something like almost a third of like the available like supply of Mover is being staked. So that will also be available on Moonbeam. I mean, a lot of the apps and other things that you see that are available today for Moonriver will also be available like on Moonbeam. So staking is definitely one. Something else that we're going to emphasize more on a move forward basis will be around like on-chain governance features. The token is also used. The underlying token is also used for on-chain governance. And so that's something where obviously one of the things we really hope to achieve and look forward to is basically all of your participation like in the governance like of the chain. I see this as like a huge competitive advantage, in terms of being able to evolve and adapt quickly to changing kind of conditions, to new information. This is something that I think is a great strength of Substrate and will be a great strength of both Moonriver and Moonbeam, especially when you compare to something like Ethereum that doesn't have these kinds of like upgrade, governance controls and upgrade features that are on chain. But last but not least would be kind of using it, as a gas token to interact with deployed protocols. And again, we're 1 week in on Moonriver, so like there's just there's already like many like applications that are there's a handful that are deployed. There's a whole bunch more in flight, but so I think that you'll be able to look at Moonriver like when the time comes to understand like there's like quite a lot of different kinds of protocols that are being deployed that you can interact with. So those would span DeFi. There's a number of DeFi protocols that we'll be deploying to actually both Moonriver and Moonbeam. Projects in the NFT space. That's obviously quite kind of there's a lot of interest like in the NFT space these days. So there's a number of teams that are going to be deploying NFT-oriented protocols to both Moonriver and Moonbeam. Games, we have Seascape was like the first like adapt that was deployed like to Moonriver. There'll be games basically like deployed as well. So yeah, I think that it's going to be there's stuff we know about and there's stuff we don't know about too. It's an open and permissionless platform, so there's people that are just like deploying things like the underlying kind of Glimmer token is the gas token for interacting with like any of those protocols.
Yeah, definitely. And so one thing that I think it's important to clarify, because I mentioned it, like a couple of minutes ago, but a lot of people have asked this question, and what I'm saying a lot is, I mean a lot. It's regarding Ledger. A lot of people use Ledger, to store a cold storage, like a cold wallet, their funds. So can you use Ledger on Moonbeam, and can you use it as a receiving address? I don't know who wants to take this question.
I can if you like, or like, yeah, does that make sense?
Go ahead,
yeah. So for Ledger, again, it kind of goes back to this like Ethereum compatibility. So for most chains that kind of launch, providing hardware wallet support is like a big, urgent like kind of task. But then like the Ledger team themselves have this huge backlog of like chains that like are looking for support. So you kind of get in line, and then 6-9 months later, maybe if like you kind of put enough pressure on and like pay enough money that you kind of like finally get like get like support. And then I know the support includes both stuff that has to happen on the ledger side, as well as like the actual like binary that goes onto like the ledger device. So I think that we've kind of cheated here, like and this is kind of our unfair advantage, where because of our like our 100% Ethereum compatibility, we're able to use just the built-in like Ethereum application on Ledger, connected to either Moonriver or Moonbeam. I think down the road we'll probably want like our own app, so it's a little bit clearer that like, so because right now you have to know to like, okay, I'm going to like use the Ethereum app even though I'm connected to like Moonriver, let's say. But it works perfectly fine, right? And so you just need to configure the ledger like with the either Moonriver or Moonbeam details, and then you can use it for signing transactions through MetaMask, say. And yeah, again, it's like, I think that's a great example of like kind of the why this like Ethereum compatibility kind of product strategy we've taken is so powerful, that like where if you're some other chain or done something some different way, then you'd be faced with this like 9-month like kind of like slog to try to get Ledger support you. But like in our case, like you can just use out of the box Ethereum application, and it just works basically, right?
Yeah, definitely. And if you use Ledger, I shared a tutorial that we have in our documentation side of how you can use Ledger with Moonbeam. The tutorial goes through the process for our testnet if you want to test it there. Also, just to mention that we also support Trezor, and there's also a tutorial for Trezor that I've shared in the chat. Make sure that you are interacting via MetaMask, right? So MetaMask will be the gateway or the connection between the network and your cold storage, your cold wallet, basically. Okay, so that's important to understand and to clarify. Yeah, so I think one other question that people have had is what are the payments from the Take Flight event? What will they'll be used for? I think this is an Aaron question for sure.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so the payments from the event are going to be used to fund network maintenance, operational expenses, ongoing sort of operation of the platform, and also of course the costs incurred for the Moonbeam launch itself. So Take Flight, this is really a two-way thing where it's also helping us get the thing off the ground.
Definitely. So one thing that I will say though is that I'm seeing some questions in the chat that we already covered. So make sure that this event is being recorded, and I will be available through the same link. So if you are in the chat and you think that there's some questions that are unanswered, please make sure to check it out after we finish. We still have a couple questions left, but make sure to revisit the event, because I'm seeing some repeated questions there. So the next question. Excuse me. So the next question is actually, an interesting one that we've received. So let's say I'm a round one participant, right? So we know that each round, there are 3 rounds. Each round has a min and max that you can contribute. So, right. But I guess for some people, it's not clear if that max is only for that round, or like say I'm a round one participant, that max for me is for like the 3 rounds because I can participate in all 3, right? So can you shed some light around that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but yeah, if you're in a round one, that max is per round per person. So you can do the max in round one if you're a round one participant, and then if you're able to participate in round 2 and 3, you can again do the maximum.
Yeah, just like the main difference between round one for round one participants is that there's a guaranteed allocation, right? So, it doesn't make sense, for example, to say I'll contribute the minimum in round one and then the minimum in round 2, because, round 2 is first come, first serves, compared to round 1, which is there's a guaranteed allocation.
That's right. Yep.
So this is another general question, and I might say that this is a Derek question. So what are upcoming integrations that the community can look forward to, right?
Yeah, I think with Moonriver, like is where like a lot of the action is happening right now, because there's a live network there. For Moonbeam, obviously we'll kind of the actual deployments will have to like await like the actual the full launch of the network, as we were describing earlier. But for Moonriver, that's where a lot of the deployment activity is being kind of centered around right now. I would say that like and I kind of mentioned, I know some of this a little bit earlier in the week on our other event, that like I think what we've come to appreciate is that there's kind of like a bit of there's dependencies basically, right? So if you're a given project, that wants to deploy, it might be the case you say, okay, well, I can deploy, but like I need like the Gnosis multi-sig, right? Like I can't like deploy securely without like the like having like multi-sig support. And I also need like Oracle support. So I need like price feeds. I'm a DeFi protocol, and I need price feeds for for my protocol. Well, so then like even though I might be ready to deploy, it might be the case that like those other two dependencies are like not present yet. So like even if I deploy my contracts, like they're not going to be like operational yet. And so there's kind of this like dependency like web or tree that like we're working through now, where it's like, okay, there's some things that are like at the base. Like for example, I'd say this this multi-sig, like a lot of teams like need the multi-sig to basically just have like a secure like kind of baseline infrastructure, right, to where funds are going to get stored. So we're kind of like working in that order, where like our energy is kind of focused right now on these like kind of what I call like the most primitive base layer, like kind of elements that are needed by everyone. And then you'll start to see there's even we'll start to see like more and more complicated things get deployed. So like bridges is another one, right? So like we talk to these DeFi protocols, like, well, you can deploy there, but like you need assets, right? And so like in order to have assets, you need the bridges. They may in turn need like other things. And then even like within, for example, DeFi is like where a lot of the project teams we've been supporting are in the DeFi sector. Even within DeFi, you get some effects like this, where for example, like it turns out like the DEX, like a DEX has like an AMM based DEX has like very few dependencies, but it's required by like a lot of other protocols. So the DEX going in is going to be one of the first things to go in, whereas like take something like a lending and borrowing protocol. It on the one hand requires a DEX, but also requires like pricing feeds typically, to be able to understand what like collateralization ratio should be for like any of the assets in there. So those, the DEX is likely first, like the lending and borrowing protocols like have these like other like requirements. So yeah, that's kind of the color I'd give, is that there's like this sequence of events. So you'll start to see, I'll call it probably more infrastructural kind of like oriented elements like are going to be coming here. Like, there's going to be activity in this area, like bridging, and some of these other like kind of lower level infrastructural elements quite soon, and then you'll start to see like other other more complex like protocols kind of deploy on top. And once we kind of once there's a lot of these elements are deployed, and there's been at least like a little bit of time to just make sure everything is working right, that's when we start to look to like future phases, which would include things like some of the liquidity bootstrapping initiatives that Aaron mentioned earlier. It doesn't make sense to start those until we're kind of sure that that like people like wanting to like that are interested don't like hit a brick wall kind of thing, right? We need to make sure all the doors are open and all the facilities are kind of like operational first.
Yeah, and I'm super excited about what like take flight participants, right? There will be future Glimmer token holders that will be able to interact with all these elements on the network, like you mentioned, like bridging solutions or DEXs and so on Moonbeam when it launches and the EVM is enabled. And we're seeing sort of like this is like a like a appetizer, let's say, with Moonriver, but Moonbeam later in the year, it'll be also super exciting to see all that coming live. So I think we're almost like at the time here. So before we finish, I want to do a couple of remarks. So for the Take Flight event, make sure you check the slide above, like we shared, regarding the checklist. It's very important that people do this pre-check. So make sure that you have everything set for September 7th if you're around one participant, and so on and further. So go to takeflight.moonbeam.foundation, make sure you're registered and your pass ID verification, have a payment and receiving address set in the website, and this needs to be Ethereum styled address as we discussed. You need to pay using MetaMask. This is very important. PC version, so you have to do a PC or laptop, not mobile, please. And payments must be done using ETH, USDT, USDC. Both stable coins need to be from the Ethereum network, so ERC20s. Make sure that you have enough ETH to cover gas fees. And there's a lot of questions like, hey, how much gas or how much ETH do I have to set apart to cover gas fees? And that's, if I knew, it's really impossible to know at the time of the event. So make sure that when you're going to contribute, you check gasnow.org, for example, or other websites when you can see information about gas at that moment. That's all like I wanted to cover as a pre-take flight checklist, which is very important, like I mentioned before, to make sure you cover all of those. Another thing that is very important is that, remember that Glimmer is a protocol token. It will be the native token of the Moonbeam network. So it's not an ERC20 token. It will be transferred when Moonbeam it's fully launched with the EVM enabled. So you'll have to connect MetaMask, for example, to Moonbeam once it's available. So that it's as we discussed before, there's a lockup period and so on. And yeah, basically, I don't know if you guys want to do some wrap up final remarks. So I guess we can start with Derek.
I would just say, it's, there's been like an overwhelming and kind of like awesome amount of interest like in, our networks in this event. So just, thank you all to everyone like watching about, for the interest in the, in the project and wanting to participate.
Yeah, and I'd echo that. Thanks so much to the community. It's really, really exciting to see all the enthusiasm. I guess the other thing I would just say, thank you to the whole team. Just trying to help the community and get everything organized. This really is a lot of people working pretty hard to have the event go smoothly. So,
all right, and thanks everyone for. Well. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Like I mentioned before, this event there will be a replay available. You can use the same link if you want to revisit this information, check the presentation, make sure you have all the checklist done for the next Tuesday when the event starts. So yeah, thank you once again for tuning in, and yeah, we'll see you around in our community if you have any questions. Thanks everyone.
Thanks.